Hey, my 1 p.m. Glass Planet had to cancel last minute. I do this consulting service where I talk to writers. He had to cancel, but I'm flying off that Red Bull right now. Like, here, wait, let me double check my schedule here. Yeah, my 1 p.m. had to cancel. So I thought I would talk about something that was in my head 2 days ago. And I would share it with you because maybe you like the same things I do. One of the things I like is the WWE or professional wrestling in general. I like AEW. I don't watch Impact, but I like it. I'm thinking about buying property in the desert. I'm thinking quarantine, the film industry sort of, the entertainment industry sort of. I love LA and I grew up here, but my entire life, I've always wanted to build this kind of magical place that's just for me where I can write and do art and host my friends. And I used to rent houses, but I thought what if I just build one? So I'm looking into buying property out in the desert. And though I'm a grown up, like many of my generation, in a lot of ways, I'm still a kid. So I asked my parents to come and look at properties with me. Like I'm a grown ass man. We're going out to the desert to look at properties. I had to drive an hour and a half, met up with my friend out there, so here's the thing. So I've always had a complicated relationship with my parents because I had a lot of behavioral and emotional problems that caused a lot of stress. My parents, in the period I was a little kid, they were recovering from a tragedy. In the period where sort of the 90s, I was the tragedy. Maybe Blues Brothers 2000 was the tragedy. I don't know. But I was a stressful kid. But I've become, in many ways, a stressful adult. Although the last 5 years, we've been pretty tight. So this is a cool opportunity for me to show my parents that I'm a big man now and I'm a grown up and I can handle myself. And on the way to the desert, I started daydreaming about Mustafa Ali, who is a professional wrestler in the WWE, and thinking couldn't there be a really good story with him? What could they do with him? And I ran out of gas on the side of the freeway in the middle of the desert. Keep in mind, my car booped and binged and said, "You're running out of gas." But in my head, I'm booking the Royal Rumble. I'm thinking about my muscly superhero TV Fighty Boys. I watch my Fighty Boy show. So my parents, I'm 2 hours late to meet my parents. When we go to the first address and it's not good, a lot of highway noise. We go to the second address, it's really out in the middle of nowhere in the desert. I want to build this beautiful compound. I'm so excited. I'm yeah, I was an hour and a half late, but my parents are in a good mood. Driving to the next location, I'm yeah, but what do you do for Mania? How do you make Retribution, Mustafa Ali's group, feel important now that they've been exposed as goofy cartoon thugs? I was And I turned off the road onto the wrong road and I drove into the sand. And my car was stuck for an hour and 45 minutes. And my friends, who are my age, who live out in the desert, had to come and help tow my car in front of my parents. Keep in mind, my friends are a married couple and they have a baby. And I'm I make videos about wrestling for YouTube. I'm financially secure, but this is the moment in my parents' eyes as my father and mother look on as their idiot son. They repeatedly asked me, "What were you thinking about? Why would you do that? Max, you're so, we thought you were past this sort of impulsive, thoughtless decision-making." And they're right, I am. Yeah, but Retribution though. So let's talk about Mustafa Ali. So if you watch WWE, you're aware that it exists in a metafictional world that combines reality with fiction. What I mean by this is interesting because wrestling, specifically WWE, but really most wrestling promotions these days, take place in fascist autocracies. Usually the company itself is portrayed as kind of a bad guy, and the bureaucrats within the company of WWE are often portrayed as villains, all at the behest of a nightmarish dictator, sociopath monster figure called Vince McMahon. Now, what's crazy about this is that most of these characters, these authority characters throughout wrestling, are played by the people who are actually in charge behind the scenes. So there's a total line blur of like a wrestler complaining about the company, a good guy wrestler complaining about the company to a villainous businessman who in real life is his boss. And some of the things the wrestler is saying is ostensibly what we know in real life they would want to say. Imagine if at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Emperor got thrown down the thing and Darth Vader died. And then George Lucas stepped out from behind a thing on the second Death Star in big armor and went, "No, Luke, your journey is not finished yet. I am George Lucas, the director and creator of this movie. You have to defeat me." And Mark Hamill, as Luke, would have to fight George Lucas as himself. This sort of shit happens all the time in professional wrestling. But what's interesting is that wrestling by its nature, by this story device, by its nature, creates a political system. Now, it's not the American political system. It's not divided into liberals and conservatives, but instead it's divided into a hierarchical idea of lawlessness. Who is given the most opportunities in wrestling companies seems entirely arbitrary and often has a lot to do with them doing things that, if they did them in real life, would send them to jail, attacking people backstage, destroying company property. The thing is, this political system, essentially a kingdom, allows for the artists, the professional wrestlers are performance artists. The artists are not always allowed, but are often allowed to air their grievances with their studio. Which is even crazier because they're doing it in character. It would be like if Rey, midway through fucking Rise of the Skywalker, turned directly to camera and went, "I'm sick of being the chosen one. I don't even like Star Wars. They've been forcing me to," like, it's crazy. It's crazy because WWE, all wrestling, they can't say it's fake, but the fact that it's not quite real is always right behind what you're watching. That's why I called Wrestling Isn't Wrestling, Wrestling Isn't Wrestling. Because it isn't. Professional wrestling is a form of performance art, narrative storytelling, based in a combination of violence, stunt work, improv, and dance, as well as acting and writing and production. I mean, like, wrestling's art. It's just art. But it is political art, even though it doesn't mean to be. By creating this system, it basically creates an environment wherein you can tell stories that evoke political and central soul emotions in people while not actually diving into the sort of pop cultural idea, especially now, of what politics is. Now, WWE is clumsy about this. They always have been. Actually, that's not true. The first time they did it, they weren't clumsy. But the first time they did it, they were ripping off something called the NWO. D-Generation X were the first sort of anti-authority characters in the WWE. And Stone Cold, and then a million other people, Daniel Bryan. But then you also have groups that are WWE being more experimental. Things like The Nexus, a group of invading rookies that ultimately went nowhere. Or not the Hurt Business. That doesn't count. Forget I said that. It's live, so I can't edit it out. I was thinking of R-Truth and The Miz when they teamed up and went crazy and they were wearing black hoodies. Even The Shield felt like an exterior paramilitary group. And most interestingly, these black-clad, riot gear-clad guys were the hand of authority characters. And they beat down the underclass of the WWE. They would fight with all the weirdos and freaks who the authority didn't like, until finally the Shield realized they were weirdos and freaks themselves, and they turned on the authority. The military revolted against the government. In wrestling, the thing I'm getting to, really the point, is that a group was recently introduced called Retribution. They were introduced on my birthday. They ran down to the ring. My birthday was August 3rd, which was right in the middle of all the BLM, like the everything. They ran down to the ring dressed like Antifa, and they beat everyone up and broke everything. And there was like 100 of them. As these characters, they were masked, and they looked like Antifa. As these characters, who were clearly inspired by the current political situation, but the company's way too cowardly to ever make an actual political statement, especially using cartoon villains. as these characters, we got to know them better, they just fucking lose all the time. And that's worse because if you know anything about wrestling, you know that under the masks are incredible wrestlers like Dominik Dijakovic and Mia Yim. So you're like, what is it's like, it would, you know that scene in Star Wars? I keep going back to Star Wars, but remember in New Hope when it turned out, or Force Awakens when they were like Daniel Craig played a stormtrooper? It's that, but on a wrestling TV show. Like, whoa. Okay, so here's the thing. I shouldn't have looked at the chat. I never look at the chat till the end because then I get distracted and I lose my flow. But I'm just gonna push. I'm just gonna push through. So here we go. So by about their 5th appearance, Retribution were wearing like goofy Halloween masks and they lose all the time. That's when they were paired with a guy named Mustafa Ali. Mustafa Ali, who I've talked about throughout this video, is a fascinating figure in wrestling. He's a great performer on the microphone. He's an incredibly spry and fast and inventive performer in the ring. He does stuff that you just haven't seen yet. And these things aren't usually combined. Usually the little fast guys, not great at talkie-talkie, but Mustafa Ali, former cop, really has a sense of depth and character. He was made the leader of this group. He came out and revealed that he organized the whole thing because he's mad about all the opportunities he's been denied in the company. So it's a classic, like, I'm sorry, that was gross. It's a classic situation where, you basically have a frustrated revolutionary rising against the company. The issue is WWE writes Retribution like Saturday morning cartoon bad guys. They're constantly just getting pummeled. All of them will attack one guy and he wrecks them all. That doesn't work. So everyone thinks Retribution sucks. If you're involved in the wrestling fan community, like I am, pseudonymously now, but I still very much am, on Reddit and stuff. If you're involved in that community, everyone's mad because they're like, Retribution's stupid. It felt like it was going to be cool. I think this mindset is wrong. Because I think there's plenty of time for Retribution to be cool. And I think there's something wonderful about Retribution starting out their coolness while still sucking. I really like the idea of taking the story seed. I do this thing in Glass Planet where I talk about story seeds. So a story seed is the central idea or theme of a story that sort of drives everything out. For Star Wars, the story seeds are like family, the spiritual connections between family. That's what they became in the first one, just a hero's journey, but it became about family. In wrestling, the story seed is conflict and fighting. But specifically, Retribution's story seed is anarchy, political anarchy. So how do you do that without ever being political? How do you make a political statement that isn't about America or the world and is instead a political statement about the WWE? Well, what's the statement they want to make? They want to break everything down, build it back up. Well, when you watch anarchists online, like Thought Slime, who's a very interesting channel, one of the really frustrating things is they talk really lefty, especially men, will talk in this extremely patronizing way, like everything they're saying is so obvious, but they don't really offer an alternative to free market capitalism. And they mainly point out holes in society, and you go, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Why do we have to pay to be alive? Why does food cost money? Like, I understand fancy food costing money, but shouldn't most food be free if there's so much of it? Like, all this stuff like that. Like, just basic non-left or right, like things that don't make sense in politics. How do we fix it? But it always bothers me because they never really come in with a plan for change. Well, what if Mustafa Ali came in with a plan for change? On Raw, Mustafa Ali fucking destroys R-Truth. He comes out, he says, you represent every problem in this company. You're a clown and they made you a championship. While guys like me scrap to even be shown on TV, you are fighting leprechauns and falling down and losing and regaining the 24/7 championship constantly to the point that it's meaningless. So we're going to give it meaning. This is now the People's Championship. Retribution jumps and beats up R-Truth. puts him through a table. Mustafa Ali is champion. Mustafa Ali is champion. Sorry, pronunciation. I'm still learning. Okay, but the segment doesn't end. He then lets every member of Retribution pin him. So now all these guys who thought they were overlooked are now all former champions in the WWE. And they just keep hot tossing it back and forth. And for weeks of Raw, all the goofs who usually go after the fucking 24/7 championship are now dealing with all of Retribution. And if you even get through them to Ali, who usually holds the title, although he gives it to Mia Yim, so she can defend the 24/7 championship against other women, so we don't only have two fucking women's storylines going on both shows at any given time. We now have a Retribution, like fun, silly women's storyline where Mia Yim can just like jack the fuck out of Dana Brooke or whoever the fuck wants to come for this. It's cool as fuck. It gives the 24/7 title a purpose. On top of that, the 24/7 title holder is guaranteed TV time. So Mustafa Ali points out things that don't make sense about wrestling. He does what the socialists and the super right-wing conspiracy theorists do on YouTube, except for he's not doing it politically. He's doing it about the fucking company he's in, the ecosystem he's trapped in and trying to reshape. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you point out the fact that the 24/7 title comes with a financial bonus. See, one of the things they mention very rarely in the rules of wrestling is that champions are paid more. Winners are paid more than losers, and the winners who get paid the most are the champions. What if every time the 24/7 title changed hands, it's cost the WWE $3,000? Now, that's probably more than they would pay their independent contractors in real life. We're not talking about real life. We're talking about funky wrestling world. What if Retribution just keeps fucking swapping the title? Like constantly. Like by the end of one episode of Raw, where they have segments throughout, they've racked up like a $250,000 price tag. It takes 3 seconds every time. So now, of course, you have characters. Basically, an imperative is put out. You have the WWE make a tweet and a fucking Instagram post and a YouTube video from Vince McMahon or Paul Triple H, any of them. Fuck it. Ed Koskey, head of creative. Any of these guys gets on TV. John Laurinaitis, I don't give a Teddy Long, gets on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter and announces to the roster the 24/7 title is contracted to exist until 2021. We need to get the title off Retribution now because they contractually can drain us of all of our money. So now every week, instead of it just being random losers, now you got the fucking Matt Riddles, the Shelton Benjamins. You got fucking Keith Lee getting in there. You have everyone who's not involved in a feud and isn't at the top of the card trying to take that title from Retribution. And yeah, of course, they beat the shit out of Retribution, and yet Mustafa Ali always finds a way because he's a team. They might be separate or weak, but apes together strong. Socialism. But we don't call it that. No rules, and we're destroying your capitalist system. That's anarchy. But we don't call it that. Maybe the announcers do, but we would never say anarchy like the political movement. Because who the fuck wants politics on wrestling? Wrestling already is its own politics. So here we go. Eventually, John Morrison and The Miz managed to actually get through of all of Retribution, and John Morrison snatches the title from Mustafa Ali. Here we go, baby. Tables, ladders, chairs. John Morrison versus Mustafa Ali. You're welcome. What the fuck? That'll be fucking sick with Miz and Retribution running in and out. You can have an incredible moment for Miz because John Morrison is like the only person Miz cares about other than Maurice. You could have like an incredible moment where John Morrison's getting pummeled after losing by Retribution and Miz sacrifices himself. You shouldn't have pissed off Retribution, Miz, because now you have Money in the Bank. Miz has the Money in the Bank briefcase currently. Mustafa Ali is like, the people's title's great, but I want the title not just of the people who live in the world. I want the whole planet. I want to be universal champion, and my first step to that is Money in the Bank. And he's right, because no one who's ever had Money in the Bank has had 4 fucking people backing them up. I mean, like, sure, Ziggler had like Big E and AJ, but if you cash in Money in the Bank, you can cash it in at any time. And Drew McIntyre is a very big, strong boy. But at this time, you're dealing with a movement that could strike at any moment. And the other people Drew McIntyre is dealing with are pretty fucking dangerous. So there's a big match, Miz versus Mustafa Ali for the Money in the Bank. Miz cheats and wins. Mustafa Ali is furious. The Retribution starts attacking Miz and Morrison left and right. They hospitalize them both. They hospitalize Miz with the Money in the Bank briefcase, which means when Miz comes back to cash in Money in the Bank, he'll be cashing it in as a total surprise because he'll be cashing it in on return from injury. Okay, so we have them dominate the mid card and just do stories about people trying to take that title and have each story represent a different mindset politically. Not, again, not in the terms of, the fucking America and all that, in the terms of WWE as a fascist oligarchy. So you have Titus O'Neil come out, and he basically says, I was a football player. I know about playing for the team, but I know that the team is only as good as it's one individual member. So he's like an individualist humanist. And he says, and I think I can beat Mustafa Ali. Surprise, he can't. But you do this with everyone because everyone in WWE, by having a character, represents a political viewpoint. And there's now an area to actually like espouse classical philosophical ideas, but through stories in wrestling that are really simple and dumb and funny because Retribution are like dumb thugs who just follow Mustafa Ali. And then finally, you get to the point where Mustafa Ali becomes so corrupt that he becomes a dictator. He gets the Intercontinental title. He sacrifices, I think, when it's time to, oh, what a heel move. When he finally wins the Intercontinental title from whoever, Retribution burns the 24/7 championship. So the last champions of fucking the 24/7 championship are just 5 pages of Retribution. And that's how it'll be forever because the contract for the title is up. So they can't bleed WWE of any more money. Except you have to keep in mind, none of this is world title shit. It's all happening in the first hour of Raw. Basically, hour 1 of Raw, or like second half hour of Raw, you give to Retribution and whoever they're working with. Everyone who works with Retribution fucking gets over because they get to beat up a bunch of stormtroopers. Retribution fucking gets over because they're funny. They don't even need to individually win matches. I think Dijakovic should eventually. I think if Shane Thorne keeps up at the rate he's going, he should too. Mia Yim needs to. Dio will figure it out. He'll figure it out and then he'll beat Lesnar. But what's so fun about this is you lean into what's silly about them. They're a dumb Antifa parody. Do dumb Antifa storylines. I don't know. I think there's something really, 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 really kind of fucking amazing if the first 4, I mean, like, what if he only gives up the Intercontinental title if the Retribution are allowed to be the first 4 in the Royal Rumble? And then it's the CM Punk new Nexus thing, except for they go all the way to number 28. They've been having so much fun with fucking Royal Rumble, that plot cycle, the way they build those matches. They've been mixing it up a lot recently in the last few years. This is another way to mix it up. Mustafa Ali is a brilliant talent. Dominik Dijakovic is a godsend. Mia Yim is a genius. All of these people are currently in a storyline where they can shine if they lean in to how dumb it is. Because the most effective storytelling is dumb stuff, simple ideas, done smart. Thanks, everybody.